I really don't care whether something has a leather working group certification, and here's why. You might notice that in the description of certain products, there's reference to the leather working group. Here's a screen grab from a Madewell bag. Let's talk about what the leather working group is. It is essentially a independent organization that has been formed and governed by companies that have some sort of interest in producing and selling leather goods. I want to emphasize a point here. The leather working group has nothing to do with the quality of the leather and only has to do with the environmental impact of the tanneries that are producing that leather. So what that means is just because something has an LWG stamp or some sort of reference to LWG, it does not mean that the leather product is good or great or bad or acceptable. None of that matters to the LWG group. It only matters what the tanneries are doing to be sustainable when they're producing that hide. This sounds like a really good idea until you delve a little bit deeper. Keep in mind that this group does not have any oversight by any governments or any third parties, so they're self governed. This is like letting tobacco manufacturers govern themselves and setting their own standards of acceptability and safety for the products that they produce. Now, I'm not saying that the standards themselves are bad, that they shouldn't have standards. Yes, of course, they should have standards that they should hold themselves up to, but they set these standards to a level that they themselves can achieve. And by that nature, they exclude a lot of completely reputable tanneries and other groups that might also produce perfectly great leather products, but they don't necessarily have the resources in terms of the fees or the capacity to go through the strenuous process it takes to get certified to be part of the leather working group or to be leather working group certified. Now, the fees that you pay to be part of the leather working group vary by how much revenue you generate per year. This audit, you pay the audit fee, but you also have to make yourself and other personnel available to undergo the audit, which takes a significant amount of effort. Now, if you're an independent tannery or maybe you are in a country that doesn't have the necessarily the resources, maybe you are a very small tannery in a developing nation, you may not have all of the resources to subject yourself to the audit or have personnel available to subject themselves through the audit. So this in and of itself, the audit process creates a very high barrier of entry in order to be LWG certified. So this certification process only checks like maybe 10 to 20% of the supply chain from agriculture, from when the hides are taken from the animals all the way to when the goods are actually delivered in store to you. Now, in that previous video, I talk about all of the human rights abuses that happen on the agriculture level that is never taken into account by the LWG audit. Also, the audit pass percentage is 50%. Now, when have you ever taken a test where the passage rate is 50%, meaning you only have to meet 50% of the minimum standards to get LWG certified, which seems a little ridiculous, especially since these companies themselves are setting their own standards and they're saying, oh yeah, we set all these standards, even on the tannery level, for you to meet all of these requirements, but you only have to meet 50% of them. So one of the things that the LWG certification does not check for is chemical pollution. A lot of these tanneries have been exported to developing nations, and there is a lot of chemical pollution that happens as a result of various tanning processes. So when all of these processes move overseas, if you are in the US, for example, you're not feeling the effects of the chemical pollution that comes out of the tanning process. Actual environmental impact that's happening in a developing nation that's never accounted for. Next is worker health and safety. Now, this also is not part of the LWG certification. A lot of toxic chemicals are used in leather production, and they always have been. Human rights abuses are quite common in the tanning industry. Now, that's just the reality of the situation. So the LWG FAQ actually says that they do not assess worker safety in the audit, which you would think would be a significant, important portion of the audit. But keep that in mind. They only focus on environmental issues. Let's put aside the human rights abuses issue altogether. When they are talking about the environmental impact, it seems almost negligent to not consider the environmental impact of the cattle. The LWG certification does not at all consider how the cattle was raised, how they were slaughtered, or any part of that process at all before the harvestation of the hide before it gets to the tanner. So, what are they even checking for when it comes to environmental issues when they're leaving out animal welfare and human welfare? The LWG is less than 20 years old. So, all of their audit process and standards that they've put into place is still very much in development and it's changing. Just not mature enough for us as consumers to place a lot of trust in the leather working group at this period of time. So if you're a tannery operating in the US or the EU, you're required to meet those standards as well. And often those standards, the EPA standards, for example, exceed the LWG's environmental standards without their certification. So what is even your incentive to get certified other than increasing your cost and it just being a very expensive marketing stamp? Lastly, guys, I'm going to leave you with this. Look at who is on the program board for the leather working group. Now, this is a screenshot from their website. Number one, Hermes is listed. There's IKEA. There's various other groups here that are just, multinational companies that produce and also distribute leather goods worldwide. So they have a very high interest to give themselves some sort of sustainability stamp so that they appear to be maybe better than their competition in the marketplace. This is a great reminder to just be wary when new marketing terms pop up, especially in the leather industry. When you actually do even a little bit of research into things like the leather working group, you'll find that there's very little substance, at least from a consumer standpoint. Let me know what you think in the comments. Does this certification mean anything to you? Will it impact your next purchase? Did I leave anything out that I should have considered? Whatever your thoughts are.